Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 24 of the JuvoHub podcast, now also on YouTube. And we're so grateful to have everyone again on our show today. An excellent show with another wonderful, fantastic guest from Tribridge Residential, Brandi Boudoin. Thank you for being here. You have been in the industry for some time. You're a regional. You're a Florida State fan, but that's okay because, you know, I'm a Miami Hurricanes fan and we still love each other after the end of each game. So it's all good to go. But so grateful to have you here.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks so much for the invitation.
Yeah, we're going to have a great conversation about asset management. But before we get into that, we have to, I think I need maybe another little noise or something, Mark, to introduce you. Not a drum roll.
Not a drum roll.
My
Ooh.
trumpet, my welcome, Mark Howell, my esteemed colleague and wonderful host as well on the JuvoHub show. Good to have you, my friend. How are things?
Things are great, buddy. I am really looking forward to this conversation with my dear friend Brandi. Brandi, I know we have been in this industry for a long time, but look, you were in this industry at what, like 6 months old, 1 month to 9 months old, being carried around in your mother's womb. So you've been in this industry a very long time.
Oh, for sure. I think I shared my first real apartment at 3.
Yeah, probably so. You remember when we used to smoke in the office still, right?
Exactly.
Like, yeah.
I passed along an application while I was puffing on my cigarette.
Yeah, I think I lit a cigarette for a prospect once. Anyway, what I love about watching your career change and grow, my friend, is that you have seen it all, you know, and I think that you have some really great advice for us today about this topic, dealing with asset managers and the conversations. I have to correct Jonathan, though. What is your title? You are an RVP, I think.
RVP, yeah, regional vice president.
What did I say?
You said a regional. Whew,
oh, I forgot the other part. I'm sorry,
yes,
Brandi.
You forgot the most important part.
There's the other section.
Tomato, it's all the
right.
same.
You know, whatever. No, sorry, but the reason I wanted to clarify that is because in our conversation, Brandi, I definitely want us to talk a little bit about how you have to have conversations with other regionals and managers, how you train them through the conversations to have effective results or conversations with your asset managers. You know, I remember years ago in our industry, we never really knew who the asset managers were. We never knew who the owners were. It was just, they were like, we would just shake the tree and the money would fall and we never knew where, you know, it came from, right? We didn't have so much at stake back then. That's probably before the market crashed. And, you know, and a lot of people say back when the industry was fun. Right. But look, I get it. You know, the owners and asset managers did certainly become much, much more involved after that because their eyes were certainly on the money. And it did change our industry. It changed our conversation. And what I do know about what you must go through every day dealing with them can be, you know, the not so fun parts of what we have to accomplish in property management. And that is explaining the financial, you know, situation of a property. But can you tell me, I've got so many questions for you, but I want to start us off by just kind of asking, like, would you say that in this last year and a half, there was a super hyper focus from the asset managers? What is it that you think they're looking most for today versus, you know, way back in the day or even just in the last year? But what does that look like today? What are they looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of piggybacking on what you said originally, how, you know, when we first got started in the business, our exposure to asset managers and investors and ownership groups was very limited. And, you know, our business has really evolved from, you know, I like to reference that old meme that has what I actually do, what my friends think I do, what my mom thinks I do. And, you know, one of the pictures that always resonates is the picture of Mr. and Mrs. Roper as the manager and owner of a little small apartment building. And, I think initially that's what our business was kind of identified as a small mom and pop type organization. And it has really evolved over the last 10, 15 years to this multi-billion-dollar industry. And it's, expanded and brought in institutional money and, money from overseas because it's such a great sector to invest in. And so we've had to adapt and pivot our way and, understand a lot more of a comprehensive way of running real estate. And, from just being a resident manager to being a community and or a property manager. So I think that the way that we've obviously done our business has changed so much. And then, to talk about what we focused on the last year, absolutely. I number one would be focusing on delinquency. I think that's been the top thing on every person's mind. What do our collections look like? What does our delinquency look like? And being able to effectively communicate that to our investment groups and asset managers, especially because they have to deliver that same message, especially for properties that are a little bit more distressed and maybe have a more blue collar type demographic that were a little bit more impacted by COVID and with layoffs and job losses or job furloughs, if you will. So I can tell you, I spent an inordinate amount of time focusing on daily collections and putting together spreadsheets and talking about what I think we're going to end up with collection wise for the month, or what kind of delinquency we're looking at. So that was 100% the most important thing that we focused in on for 2020 and carrying on into 2021 as well.
I mean, it seems like, gosh, what do you do? Shake a crystal ball, shake your, what was that thing called? The 8-ball. And
yeah,
if
magic 8-ball.
Asset manager asks you a question about where will we be with delinquency? Hold on, Jim.
Yeah.
Where will we be with not outcome, not good?
Yeah, outlook not so good.
How do you even wow, I get it. I think it had to be extremely stressful, not only for the ownership groups, but for you to explain that to them that you really don't know. We didn't know where we stood in 2020.
Right.
Even with this eviction moratorium, do we even know yet how that's going to affect us? No. So my gosh, what a difficult way to sit down and have to redo the budget.
Yes.
But I want to go back to a joke you said about the ropers. It's so funny because, yes, I agree with you. Back in my day when I was young and I would tell people what I did. And then years later, I would run into these people. They would say, hey, are you still baking cookies and driving around on the golf cart? And I'm like, you know what? We do a lot more than that. So there is a huge, piece of our business, but you're right. I didn't get exposed to how many investors overseas were really looking at our industry. It didn't dawn on me until it was really told to me a few years back when I worked for a company that did a lot of value add and purchased a lot of properties to do the value add, that, these investors, a lot from Israel they were looking for a place to kind of put their money, and so they had this faith in our institution or our industry that this is the best place for it. And we all do have that responsibility to make sure that we keep that strong for them. It's funny when we talk about this, it's this super focus on numbers and analytics. Every time I think of an asset manager, I think, gosh, sometimes they speak in a language I don't even understand. They're so hyper focused on all of these details.
Right.
But explain to me how it is that you can you try to encourage them to remember that it's still a people business, because I feel like there's this sort of sometimes disconnect with asset management, either asking for money or explaining why things didn't happen. And because, people are unpredictable and we can't control some of this. So how does that conversation go?
Yeah, very true. I think that's probably one of our biggest responsibilities, is to remind our asset managers and investment committee groups that this is still a people-oriented business. Without our renters and our on-site team members, we don't have a business to run. So we have to still be forward-focused on the customer service aspect. And sometimes I think that can get lost in the analytics. especially if you've got a group that is hyper focused on meeting a pro forma, or, obviously giving a certain rate of return back to their investors, that message can get lost. So it's our jobs absolutely to make sure that we get that message across, and we're still understanding at the end of the day that it is a business and we're responsible for a multi-million-dollar asset. And when the property fails, we have to take it on the chin for that and deliver that message. But at the end of the day, it is still a people business, and having that partnership and that understanding with the asset manager or the investment team is uber important. It's not always easy to deliver bad information or misses, and it's just the best thing to do is to rip the Band-Aid off and have the conversation, and don't sugarcoat it, and move forward. And I always work with my RPMs and my on-site managers that a lot of times the asset manager wants to be part of the solution, and so we should come to them with the situation, have a solution in mind, but let them contribute. And sometimes 2 heads are better than 1, 4 heads are better than 2, and together you can come up with the right solution that's going to fix whatever the issue is, and get the property performing right, back on the right track. But having the real conversation and not trying to gloss over it is probably one of the most important things as well.
Yeah, Jonathan, was that your signal? I see you. Jonathan always gives me a signal when he wants me to stop talking.
It's my deep thought signal.
Oh, okay.
Those are on YouTube, they can see it's like ponderous. Well, I just, you mentioned a couple of things, Brandi, that it almost made me feel like, oh man, some people who listen to this show, they may be wondering, and how vested our industry is in educating the next generation that comes into property management. And we have the leasing professionals and the managers and the community managers and our maintenance staff. And now we're talking about asset management. And you've demonstrated the complexities to that. Like if we were before a college audience right now, what would be any takeaways of what you've seen and how things have changed drastically, like Mark was saying, from 2007, 2008, and now we're dealing with these delinquency issues here to 2020, 2021. As a mentor for that position, what have you learned? What would you want to share that has kind of kept you always ready to be able to have those tough conversations with owners and with investors?
Yeah, great question. I feel like that's kind of a 2-part ask, because I think you've got, college students that are coming out of business school and heading into the investment side of things. And, how would we address that group of new and analysts or asset managers? Mm-hmm. So starting with that, I think that while the analyst side of it and looking in the numbers is obviously the most important thing on their side, having the foresight to know that without the right on-site team and having a great resident base, the numbers aren't going to make sense. Right. So working with your management firm to create a partnership and kind of leaning on them in some cases to be the market experts and work together in tandem to create a business plan and to make sure that the property is operating at full capacity, I think is probably the advice that I would give. I think sometimes they get too involved in the numbers and they forget that there's a human element attached to it. Mm-hmm. So, just kind of taking that and I guess building kind of a better basis of understanding from all angles. And then from people getting into our side of the business, understanding that, I think a lot of times they get kind of lost in the fact that they are dealing with people day in and day out, and they want to be helpful. And it's hard to say no to somebody when they're face to face with you. So kind of taking a step back and looking at the big picture and realize that while we may not be able to give them exactly what they want from a resident ask or a prospect ask, because we do have a business to run and this is a money-making opportunity. It's a for-profit business. Right. there may be something that we can do to work around that. And, make kind of mirroring all those different sides, which is a hard task to do because, your brain doesn't always work in both capacities. Either you're a people person or you're a numbers person. And a lot of times those two don't always mix together.
That's right.
So understanding that we kind of have to wear both hats. And I think that's probably the best advice that I could give.
Yeah, I like that advice. And you're right. What difficult advice that is sometimes, because you're dealing with two different spectrums, right? In your position, you're dealing with the everyday human element of, just what we like to call the babysitting. And what I mean by that, not to insult anyone, is that there's a lot of personality, in what we have to do every day with not only residents, but employees, and all of the emotions that come in just being around someone all day. So you have to deal with that and explain to an asset manager why we didn't get, 10 leases, the 10 leases you wanted. Well, Maggie called out sick, or, the maintenance guy was fighting with the property, and they don't understand that. They don't really care, but
exactly.
It does affect everything that sort of trickles up, because what we do out on site trickles up into the numbers, which goes right to the asset manager's lap. And they're like, well, I don't really care about all that. Just tell me why we didn't get the 10 leases. I just did, but I had a question. Yes. So here it is. And it kind of goes in line with this. Like when you are coaching your managers, when you're coaching them, because look, let's face it, asset managers, they show up on the property now, and so do owners, right? You're not just the middleman anymore. Sometimes they're present. And what I do find is that when our managers or teams aren't coached the right way, we can sometimes give away too much, right? We can certainly cause reason for alarm if they don't understand, how do I say this, the importance of effective communication. Does that make sense? So
yes.
Tell me, when you're talking with some of your managers, what is it, how do you say, like, hey, we don't have to give the whole story. We want to give the most important details, but remember, those guys, your asset managers, the analysts that are looking at numbers, they don't want to hear the whole story. No. So tell me a little bit about that, because I know that has to be a challenge.
Oh, it absolutely is. And I have two real life examples to use. The first one was the best piece of advice I ever got was, I asked you what time it was, not how to build the clock, which means I was giving way too much detail and background information when I should have just bullet pointed.
Yep.
So I was like, okay, that resonated with me. So now I go with the punchline and then back into it, depending on if that's how that particular person likes to be communicated with. And then the second piece of, or I guess, thing that I learned from being on site was I had an asset manager who liked to listen to people talk. And so he would just kind of, give you a topic or ask a question, and then he would stop and he would not respond. And what he learned in that was that the person got very uncomfortable and they would start giving more information. And that's how he found out more about the situation than he probably should have. Yeah. So I learned very quickly that was happening. So we actually got into a conversation and I stopped, and there was a lot of awkward silence, but it actually helped me because I didn't give away too much information. And not that we're trying to hide anything, because that's not the goal of what we're trying to do, but they don't need to know, all the inner workings of the clock, so to speak. So how I train my RPMs and my managers is just give the facts. Don't give all the fluff that goes with it. Just, like same thing with an email. If you want to deliver information, nobody really wants to read long-winded paragraphs. They want to see what the highlights are, what the bullet points are. This was X, this was Y, this was Z. And that way it gives the reader an opportunity to digest without all of the additional fluff and words that come along with it. We all get so many emails on a daily basis that reading through something that's a 3-paragraph email, I usually will just push that aside until the end of the day. And most of the time I forget to go back to it. So I know I like to communicate with bullet points. So that's usually how I start. And then if I find that the reader or my audience has a different style, then I try to adapt my way into what works best for them. So also kind of learning what their preferred method of communication is. Some people primarily only want to communicate via email. Some prefer phone calls. So you have to figure out what the best form of communication is, and deliver that message as well. And then hopefully your relationship will build on that.
Yeah, that's great
Awesome.
advice.
That is
Yeah,
awesome.
I love the study of and teaching things about communication, because I think we learn so much about each other, and
Right.
how you communicate may not be necessarily the way I hear or communicate back. And I've gotten to a point in my career, maybe just in my life, where I'm like, I'll just ask somebody, how do you want me to communicate with you? Because I don't want to screw this up, So I think if we can just be honest about it, how do you want me to reach out? And if you notice that your asset manager is still emailing you or texting you at 9:00 at night, then you know what? I mean, we have to kind of maybe adjust a little, because, this person is controlling a multi-million-dollar asset. So it's interesting, because I think a lot of times I hear people complaining about that, oh, they want so much from me and I have to work overtime to get this done. But
Yeah.
I don't know, are we forgetting that? Well, I mean, they are asking about a, $80 million property. So their brains probably don't shut off.
Never. They
Woo.
never shut off.
No.
But also what I've learned in that is, especially if you have clients that are on different coasts, that they may communicate after hours, but they're not always necessarily requesting a response at that time. So as long as you set a tone and they know that you're going to respond within a certain window, then I think that's okay too, as long as you set that expectation. Make sure that's communicated, in the beginning of the relationship, so that they understand, okay, I'm going to send an email after hours. I'm not expecting her to jump on an email at 11 a.m. Not everybody's crazy like me, where they wake up at 3 a.m., look at their email and send something off really quickly. It's nuts. But but I think you can set the tone and still be successful, and be considered a good communicator, and sharing the correct information.
Mhm.
That's really excellent. Like I love the I love the advice. I'm going to use that one too, Brandi, by the way. I don't think I've ever heard that expression before. I asked you what time it is, not to tell me how to build a clock. It like immediately a gazillion scenarios came into my head where I'm probably going to use that.
Feel free.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. I think it's so great for our audience too. It's like, well, we're dealing with such a complex, high volume. What did NAA say? It's like our industry is like in the billions of dollars a year of what we generate for property management.
Yes.
I don't remember the exact number, but it's huge. It's huge, and it's only continuing to grow. So, besides being the numbers person, if that's what you are, that's who you are, you still have to be able to clearly get that message across. And like you mentioned so eloquently, the expectations, how are we going to do it? What's the information needs to be provided? What doesn't need to be provided? I thought that was just excellent. Yeah. So appreciate that so much. Excellent thoughts there and feedback.
Of course.
Yeah. It's funny. I'll tell a little story. Back when I think that it's so important that we explain this to even leasing consultants, so they have a total understanding of why all these things are so important, right? To be prepared for these conversations when an asset manager shows up.
Right.
What typical things are they looking for? When they want to know about the market, be prepared, and I don't know that we spend as much time as we should preparing a leasing consultant to answer that. I remember, like, I was told once on site, like, when they get here, just stare at your computer, don't look up, you just don't say anything. And I was like, oh my God, I got so scared and so nervous. because the big wigs were coming, you know, and I was like, okay, I won't even look up. And I just pretended like I was typing a very, you know, like the presidential speech or something. And I thought it doesn't need to be this way. You know, if you just told me what it is that they're looking for, then I could be a part of the solution, because now what we know is they'll show up anytime they want. And when your teams aren't prepared for that, wow, isn't that embarrassing? But yeah, this was really great advice. I really appreciate you being on with us and sharing this advice with us today.
My pleasure.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. Like so many little nuggets to take away. And I know our audience definitely are making those notes. You mentioned something, you know, when we were just before we were starting to record, like what's your go-to thought or go-to saying? What do you live by? Do you want to share that with our audience today?
Yeah, of course. My go-to is always, I can't change you, but I can change me. And I think that goes very well with this topic, because I have to change and adapt my style to fit your needs and your expectations. So I use that quite often, and I try to work with my team members in that same capacity, especially dealing with residents and communication. So it's served me well so far.
You know, Brandi, one thing that I will say that I love about you is that even though you have to have these difficult conversations with people that, you know, have expectations, you always seem to bring so much fun into the room. And even as I've watched you in different places and your career path has changed, that's the one consistent, that you're such a fun spirit. And so I'm glad to see that the stressful conversations you must have to have hasn't taken that fun out of you, because you still bring it into every room that you come into. So I appreciate you hanging on to that.
Oh, thanks, Mark. That's so sweet. You know, I think if you can't have fun doing it, then why do it?
Why do it?
Numbers are fun.
But here's my question,
I didn't say
Brandi.
that. You pushed it too far.
Yeah. My question is do you feel that way at 3 a.m. when you're doing your first email? I mean, do you have that same enthusiasm at that time? Is that even possible? I can't even imagine getting up at 3 a.m. and wanting to start doing emails.
Yeah, you know, it's not usually that I'm having fun at that point. It's usually that I'm just wide awake. And so I was like, I might as well tackle it while I'm here.
Yeah.
It's one more check I get to do.
Yeah. Well, kudos to you. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate having you on the show.
My pleasure.
Any social channels that you don't mind people connecting with you on? Your company website? How can people reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my email address is brandib@tbrs.com, and Brandi is spelled with an I. You can also reach out to me on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm sure I have a Snapchat or TikTok. I kind of go where the social media takes me. And our company website is tribridgeresidential.com. So awesome. Any of those mediums, feel free to reach out.
Yeah. That's actually kind of perfect, because it's like you said, you have so many different types of investors. You have to be with them, so you might as well be on every.
I'm everywhere.
Yeah, you got to get on Clubhouse now. You know, that'll finish the whole package. You know,
what's Clubhouse?
Don't even stop. There's a whole nother place I got to get involved in. Like, I can't even embrace Snapchat, so stop it, Jonathan.
Well, live with a 14-year-old. That's all, and that's how they communicate.
Yeah. So great. Thank you so much for being here. And my man, Mark, how can people connect with you? Howell Creative Concepts, everyone.
Absolutely. Howell is spelled H-O-W-L, creativeconcepts.com, or you can email me at mark@Howell, which is H-O-W-L, creativeconcepts.com. Thank you guys so much for having me. And if anyone listening has a topic that you're passionate about that you would like to bring to the table, please email myself or Jonathan, let us know, and we would love to have you on. But Brandi, I really appreciate you being on with us today. Thank you for all of the great advice.
Of course. I had so much fun. It was great chatting with you.
You too.
Wonderful. Jonathan Saar here from Market Me Social. This has been episode 24 of the JuvoHub podcast, and we're so glad everyone's here. Be sure to give us that thumbs up, review, share it with your network, this education that we're putting together to you. As you can see, we have a lot of fun on this show, and more fun to come. So thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.